A couple of weeks ago, we saw the team of Mark and Joe Coffey make their debut in RWLs. Oh, they are back tonight, facing Mid-South champion Billy White Moon and his tag team partner Jim Dandy Deacons, Best of the West, to wrap up the first hour tonight.
The following tag team contest is set for one fall with a 20-minute time limit. Introducing first, both from Scotland, at a combined weight of 490 pounds, the brothers Joe and Mark Coffey.
Well, we didn't pick up Wolfgang during our latest WWE fire sale bargain hunting, but we did get the Coffey brothers, Mark and Joe. To real-life brothers, who together with Wolfgang, cut themselves a path as Gallus in WWE.
And they have impressed with their recent performances since they debuted in October. And this tag match with Best of the West is one I'm sure looking forward to. So we can really see what the Coffey brothers are all about.
That's easy. They're all about old school wrestling style, and man, do they ever deliver on that.
You ain't lying, Wally. They remind me of Rick Boogs as far as being old school style, and they've definitely got it. So it's going to be a great mix with Best of the West. I promised you guys Texas Thanksgiving was going to be great, and well, let's get the party started right now with Best of the West.
Their opponents at a combined weight of 498 pounds. First, from Abilene, Texas, Jim Dandy Deacons, and Norman O'Connor, their WL Mid-South champion Billy White Moon, Best of the West.
The Mid-South champion and his longtime friend and tag partner Jim Dandy. They don't lose very often. Billy in particular has held on to the Mid-South belt with an iron grip since taking it from Tito Santana last year.
This is a first-time encounter between themselves and the Coffey brothers, so it's gonna be a little different, a little tougher of a challenge for the Western Besties. Being in undiscovered country, it won't be anything like their dealings with the unholy trinity, who they've become very familiar with.
Alright folks, that is Joe Coffey in the striped trunks, and he'll be starting off against Billy White Moon in this tag team matchup. As referee Willie Johnson rings the bell, and off we go to the races. They lock it up. Joe Coffey with the upper hand, but White Moon counters with some elbows, a throat chop, a chop across the chest, but a quick counter, a hip toss from Joe Coffey and a knee to the head of Billy White Moon. White Moon, locked up by Joe Coffey, whipped right into the referee, an elbow from White Moon, right, another, a headlock takedown. Billy White Moon, very skilled in the scientific techniques. He is squeezing for all he's worth. Joe Coffey finds his way out. White Moon gathers him up, gets a hold on him, and a belly-to-belly suplex, dead center ring. Nicely done by Billy White Moon. The Mid-South champ gets a hold of Joe Coffey again. And, oh man, what a chop. Oh, you heard that one all through the building. White Moon stopped by Mark Coffey from taking a high-risk maneuver. Mark Coffey returns to his corner. Joe Coffey just getting to his feet as White Moon gets back inside the ring, gets a hold on him. Another hard right forearm from Billy White Moon. White Moon with a series of short rocket kicks to the head and a quick cover and a quick hook of the leg long. Just one, says Willie Johnson. Huh. Well, Joe Coffey having his share of problems here. Whip to the Best of the West corner. Here comes Jim Dandy on the tag. Here comes a double team from Best of the West. Air assisted shoulder tackle as Jim Dandy moves in, and here comes Mark Coffey for the first time in the matchup. Jim Dandy rounded up by Mark Coffey, set against the ropes. Mark choking Jim Dandy with the top rope, and yanks it, rolling Jim Dandy out to center. Mark Coffey with a stomp to the arm of Jim Dandy. Dandy quickly back up on his feet, whips Mark Coffey to his team corner. Mark Coffey about to be introduced to the turnbuckle and his 9 cousins. Oh man. Wow. Jim Dandy took his time with that one. Mark Coffey collapses center ring. Jim Dandy Deacons takes himself all the way to the top. And he is waiting for Mark Coffey to stand himself on up. Here he comes and, oh, holy old hell, did you see that? Mark Coffey caught him and scoop slammed him center ring. That's power. Running bulldog from Mark Coffey. And now we're starting to see the Coffey brothers pull away here as Billy White Moon comes in on the tag. A running kick to the face from Billy White Moon. Mark Coffey catches a right from White Moon. White Moon locks him up, whips him to the ropes, ducks under, and oh man, what a right from White Moon. Here's a cover and a hook of the leg one, but no. Mark Coffey powers out of the pin. Billy White Moon right there to round him up again. Hurls him into the corner. Jim Dandy comes in to take over, but before he goes, there's a double team from White Moon and Jim Dandy. A back body drop for Mark Coffey, and down he goes. Jim Dandy doing a little showing off. Oh man. Joe Coffey comes in with a Luthez press on Jim Dandy Deacons. Tries to round him up for a bear hug. Jim Dandy, with a double ear clap, disengages himself from Joe Coffey. A right, a jab, but a hip toss from Joe Coffey. Jim Dandy makes his way to a standing position using the ropes. Joe Coffey right there hangs him up by the waist over the top rope. That is a painful thing. As Mark Coffey comes in on the tag. Jim Dandy slowly making his way to a standing position, catches the right. Catches another one. Mark Coffey counter whipped over the top rope and out onto the apron. A right from Jim Dandy Deacons. A second one. A third one finally puts Mark Coffey on the floor. Jim Dandy going after Joe Coffey too. Hangs him up off the top rope. Both Coffey brothers laid out. Best of the West standing tall right now as Billy White Moon comes in on the tag. Referee counting. Oh man. Billy White Moon slides on out. Goes after Mark Coffey. They're battling over the fallen body of Joe Coffey. There's one we don't see every day. Taking swings at each other, but Joe Coffey's in the way. Nice arm drag from Mark Coffey. Goes behind on him. One arm slam from Mark Coffey to Billy White Moon. White Moon rolled back inside the ring, just about knocking over Willie Johnson. Mark Coffey whips White Moon to his team's corner, follows it up with a clothesline. Down goes Billy White Moon, and in comes Joe Coffey on the tag. Again, the Coffey brothers trying to turn this one around. White Moon whipped to the ropes. Joe Coffey ducks under, leapfrogs, swings and misses. White Moon gets a hold of him, whips him to the ropes. Joe Coffey catches a kick to the midsection and a spin kick to the head. Down he goes. White Moon locks him up again. Joe whipped to the best of the West corner. Billy White Moon playing tug-of-war with the arm of Joe Coffey. White Moon delivers a set of knees to the midsection. Joe Coffey definitely taking a pounding here at the hands of Best of the West. He counters, finds his way out of the corner at last. Locks it up with White Moon. White Moon counters with elbows to the heads and a spinning neck breaker. Here's a cover center ring from Billy White Moon. 1, 2. Joe Coffey powers out of the pin. Billy White Moon starting to look a little bit frustrated. White Moon with a kick to the head off the rope. Nicely done. Off the middle rope, moonsault beautifully executed by Billy White Moon. The Choctaw Chopper definitely firing on all cylinders tonight. Counter whipped into his own corner by Joe Coffey. Joe Coffey grinding the forearm against the face of Billy White Moon. Down goes White Moon, seated into his own corner. Joe Coffey gets him by the ankles, alley-oops him up out of the corner. Billy White Moon in some trouble here as Mark Coffey comes in on the tag. White Moon slow to stand up. Mark Coffey right there rounds him up. slams him into the turnbuckle, hurls him towards center. Mark Coffey rounds up Billy White Moon again. Whips him to the Coffey brothers' corner. And he too is playing tug of war with the arm of Billy White Moon against the ropes. Mark Coffey countered by Billy White Moon. White Moon locks him up. Whips him towards the Best of the West corner. Billy gonna quickly countered by Mark Coffey, locked up. Kick to the midsection of White Moon. Mark Coffey gets a hold of him, has him up. Crashing brainbuster from Mark Coffey. A knee to the head of Billy White Moon. And he's going to go after Jim Dandy too. Tags him with a hard right hand. Steps out onto the apron. Jim Dandy's going for a ride. Oh, man. Crashes into the lip of the apron. Mark Coffey taken down by Billy White Moon. White Moon rounds him up. Into the ring post time. 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 Yes, I had to. Billy White Moon with knees to the leg of Mark Coffey. Jim Dandy Deacons is still out of it from Mark Coffey's attack. White Moon rounds him up. The hot kiss at the end of the wet fist. Boom, there it is. Mark Coffey goes down. Jim Dandy Deacons back at his tag corner as Billy White Moon assists a recalcitrant Mark Coffey towards the ring. He does not want to go, and he's delivering elbows to the midsection of Billy White Moon. White Moon locked up by Mark Coffey. Finally escorted back inside the ring. Mark Coffey makes his way in. Billy White Moon gets a hold of him, whips him to the Best of the West corner. A kick to the ribs, and another, and a jump kick into the chest from Billy White Moon. The Mid-South champion quickly countered here by Mark Coffey. Slam face first to the canvas. And Mark Coffey, look at this. Here comes Jim Dandy on the tag. He was not expecting that. Mark Coffey winds him up. Delivers the Russian leg sweep in spite of the surprise tag. A stomp to the midsection to Jim Dandy. This man, whoa! A series of clubbing elbows to the back of the head from Mark Coffey, who goes after White Moon too. Turns his attention back to Jim Dandy. Locks him up. Kick to the midsection. Mark Coffey gets a hold of him, has him up. Another brainbuster, this time for Jim Dandy. Mark Coffey catches an elbow from Jim Dandy Deacons. A chop, a right, a shot to the midsection, and a DDT from Jim Dandy. A cover and a hook of the leg. 1, 2. Oh, man. We just hit the halfway mark, and there's still no sign of a winner. This has been a good match so far. Wow. Jim Dandy whips Mark Coffey to the Best of the West corner. A quick jab to the face turns it over to Billy White Moon. A double team kick to the ribs. White Moon gets a hold of Mark Coffey. Has him up over the shoulder in the fireman's carry. Hangs him up off the top rope. Billy White Moon quickly rounds him up again. Mark Coffey going back for another visit to the corner. And another set of knees from Billy White Moon. Mark Coffey collapses into the corner. Here we go as a couple of stomps to the face. Billy White Moon rebounds off the ropes, and there's a face wash to Mark Coffey, who rolls out towards center. Billy White Moon right there on top of him, stalking him, on it like a hornet. A counter from Mark Coffey. Back inside the ring. Locks it up with White Moon. White Moon gets the upper hand, whips him to the Best of the West corner. He counters and finds his way out. A hard right from Mark Coffey. A hard uppercut takes White Moon down. Here's a pin. 1, 2. No dice. White Moon powering out of that one. And here comes Joe Coffey on the tag. Joe Coffey locks it up with White Moon. Belly to belly suplex. A nice one too. Here's another cover. 1. Well, you can't say they ain't trying. There have been a lot of pin attempts and a lot of near falls in this matchup. A shade over the halfway mark already. Billy White Moon on the wrong side of town, being roundly abused by the Coffey brothers. A driving knee into the head of White Moon by Joe Coffey. Joe starts to unload with hard right hands to the head of Billy White Moon. Oh, man. White Moon might want to think about tagging out to Jim Dandy at this point. He is getting hammered. Joe Coffey catches a leg sweep from Billy White Moon. And he's not going to leave without a parting shot. And looks like this is going to be it. There's a pulling pile driver to Joe Coffey. Followed up with a stomp He rolls out to the floor. Billy White Moon turns his attention to Mark Coffey, but quickly gets countered. Joe Coffey snaps out of it finally. But White Moon decides he's going to take it out on Mark Coffey with a set of 10-shot punches to the chest. And Mark Coffey is about to go down. Joe Coffey goes behind on White Moon, sets him up for the electric chair drop. And, oh man, whoa! A belly-to-back suplex with a pin. 1, 2. That was impressive. I'm telling you, the Coffey brothers are good. Hard right to White Moon. A running elbow takes White Moon down. Another pin from Joe Coffey. 1, 2. And Jim Dandy had to get in there and break things up. This one's getting intense. Stamping the hands and fingers of Billy White Moon. Joe Coffey starting to turn to more aggressive methods as this match progresses. Yanks White Moon across the town by the ankle. Joe Coffey with a little bit of showboating. A charge, a clothesline, out to the floor goes Billy White Moon. And now, the Coffey brothers trying to turn this thing around. Jim Dandy brought into the ring the hard way by Joe Coffey. Mark Coffey rolls White Moon back inside the ring. Joe Coffey returns his attention to the legal man in the ring. Misses with that move. Rebounds off the rope, flying punt, and we just lost Willie Johnson. Oh, man. White Moon with a stomp to the face of Joe Coffey. He rebounds off the ropes and a running knee to the side of the head of Joe Coffey. Our referee, accidentally, of course, taken out. Whoa! Over the top rope elbow from Billy White Moon to Joe Coffey. Billy White Moon eyeing Mark Coffey, too. Goes after him. Oh, no, he's going to do it again. He wasn't satisfied with the first 10. He's going to get himself 20 on Mark Coffey. Joe Coffey nowhere to be found as his brother gets absolutely hammered by Billy White Moon. The Choctaw Chopper is definitely fired up. Locks up Joe Coffey. Whips him to the corner. Billy White Moon moves in on him slow. Another game of tug of war, this time with the arm of Joe Coffey. Billy White Moon. Another set of driving knees into the midsection. Down into the corner goes Mark Coffey. Joe Coffey, excuse me. Billy White Moon putting all his weight into both boots into the chest of Joe Coffey. Handspring and boom, double knees to the chest. Joe Coffey rolls out towards center. And Billy White Moon turns it over to Jim Dandy Deacons. The match 3/4 of the way through the time limit and still no winner. These guys are good. Joe Coffey counters and escapes the corner, gets a hold of Jim Dandy Deacons. Hard whip to the Coffey brothers corner. Joe Coffey returns to work on the left arm of Jim Dandy Deacons. Gets him back into the corner. Jim Dandy counters with an elbow, gets a hold of Joe Coffey, and whoa! A hard right hand right to the face. Here comes Billy White Moon again. What a match we've had so far, man. Wow. The Coffey brothers doing not too badly for themselves here. A wrist clutch knee to the foot to the side of the head from Billy White Moon to Joe Coffey. White Moon setting it up. Surfboard stomps to the back of Joe Coffey. White Moon gathers him up again. One more trip into the best of the West corner here. White Moon up on the middle rope, a flying kick to the head of Joe Coffey. Down he goes. Billy White Moon, oh, with a potent double axe handle to the chest. Here comes Jim Dandy again. And we're down to the last 3.5 minutes of this match, and still no sign of a winner. Unbelievable. What a performance from these two teams. A quick counter from Joe Coffey to Jim Dandy. A clothesline from Jim Dandy takes Joe Coffey down. And he's going to go after Mark Coffey while he's about it. Hangs him up the top rope and takes him down to the floor. And a little bit of line dancing from Jim Dandy. Joe Coffey on the outside. Billy White Moon rolls him in. An elbow drop off the top rope from Jim Dandy to Mark Coffey. And he's out. Gone, gone, gone. Joe Coffey going after White Moon. Jim Dandy back in the ring. A right, a left, a headbutt, and a double shot to the midsection to Jim Dandy. A right, a left, another shot, and another forearm. Finally taking Jim Dandy down to the canvas. Joe Coffey whips him to the ropes, ducks under. Here comes Jim Dandy into a perfect power slam, dead center ring. Nicely done by Joe Coffey. Here's another pin one. Unbelievable. Neither one of these teams is saying quit, man. Hard right hands from Joe Coffey. Mark Coffey brings himself in. The referee about to start counting him. He goes back to his corner. Jim Dandy with a kick to the midsection of Joe Coffey. Locks him up, whips him to his team's corner. Here comes Billy White Moon one more time. A little over 2 minutes to go. Double axe handle across the arm of Joe Coffey. Billy White Moon gets a hold of him, whips him to the ropes, misses with the spear. Joe Coffey puts on the brakes. They lock up again. Look at this. White Moon, whoa, with a tornado neck breaker I've never seen him do before. Here's a cover and a hook of the leg. 1, 2. Well, that about does it. Best of the West defeats the Coffey brothers by pinfall.
The time, 18 minutes and 11 seconds. Your winners by pinfall, Billy White Moon and Jim Dandy Deacons. Best of the West.
How about that? Another buzzer beater win for Deacons and White Moon.
White Moon, just always with the surprises. That tornado neckbreaker move is definitely a new addition to an already lethal repertoire.
Great win for Best of the West. Great way to wrap up the first half of tonight's Snarl, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back with the second half right after the break.